Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pentester Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Erik Cabetas. Hi, Erik. How you doing?
Hey, doing great, Thomas. How's it
Good.
going in the UK?
Yeah, very good. Same as always. Very dark, very miserable, and it's raining. So yeah, how's New York?
Nice. Yeah, so I'm living here in New York City. It's generally a little bit of dark and bad weather, but today's not so bad. It's a slightly good weather.
Cool, very good. So I'm going to do Erik a bit of an intro. So Erik is the managing partner of a boutique consultancy called Include Security. They're coming out of New York City. They're a group of old school, what I would call old school proper hackers, if you like. Erik is very experienced when it comes to web app security, web app pen testing, assessments. He spent time as a CISO. He's also worked in a blue team as well as a red team capacity. Erik was involved with application security way before any of this stuff was even cool. And I think there's a hell of a lot that me and the listeners can learn from him. I've done you a bit of an introduction, Erik, but I could never do it as well as you. Yeah. Can you tell us who you are and what you've been up to?
Sure. Thanks very much, Thomas. So I've been in the industry a little bit over 20 years now. Started out in the late 90s as like an underground hacker. Did a lot of fun things with friends and found out that I really liked writing exploits and did memory corruption exploits and found CTF contests. I was lucky enough to work with my team Anomaly and we won DEF CON CTF. And over the years, I've done a lot of different things. I've worked at product companies, I've worked in enterprise, but the majority of my career has been in consulting and specifically working in offensive consulting. Yes, definitely done a lot of web apps, but I've also pen tested and worked with pen testers that are hacking on all sorts of systems from peer-to-peer networks to IoT devices, pretty much anything above silicon.
Okay, brilliant. There's loads to unpack there, and we're going to get into a few different things in relation to what you've mentioned there, Erik. But thanks for that. But in terms of Include security itself, what is it you would say you're the best at, specialize at as an organization, and what problems do you aim to solve?
Sure. So we started IncludeSec January 2011. And the whole concept of Include Security is to create a team of all senior hackers that can all work together to provide high value assurance and assessments for clients. Web is super huge in what we do. It's obviously for everybody in technology these days, but we'll do, as I mentioned, we'll do anything above silicon. So the mission of our company is to create an environment for our hackers where they can do their best work. So I like to say Include Security is the company where hackers do their best work. And then our clients tend to be the companies that don't want to just check a box. They
Yeah.
really want a proper security assessment. And was there a second part to that question that I didn't quite answer? I think it was.
Just basically just what problems do you aim to solve as
What
well?
problems? So it's basically the business problem of security pen testing, security assessments, whatever you want to call it. We're trying to do that better than other people. That's in short, that's the thing we're trying to solve. Or at least I don't think it's ever going to be solved, but it's going to be much more improved. And then I guess that's from the client perspective, from the employee perspective. We're trying to create a company where it's not a pen test mill, not an exploit sweatshop, where you get time to do research, you get time to properly learn new technologies, and it's an environment that fosters professional growth and a variety of things. So I've worked at many other pen test consultancies, and sometimes you're working on the same client for years, or you're just working on the same technology across the whole sector, like Java web apps in finance, like for years and years. And these things are something that we try to get away from the employee experience.
Yeah, okay. So this isn't so much like regulatory stuff, Erik, or PCI DSS. This is properly digging deep and literally
Yeah,
leaving no stone unturned, finding everything.
both. Let me explain. At the end of the day, I wish every client in the world could be like, I've got $1 million to throw to pen test my app, but that's the reality. People don't, right? So we work with clients to find the right size, the assessment that fits their budget. So some clients are like, listen, I do have $1 million. Let's hack the crap out of this until every bug is found. Some clients are like, listen, I have this number and it's a very low number and that's all I got. What can you do for that? So we'll work with people however they want. And the assessments are a key component to solving those other problems that you mentioned. PCI DSS 6.2 says you have to have a third-party penetration test, right? So you can't solve PCI DSS without having a security assessment. So it is part of the solutions to those problems that you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Brilliant. Thanks, Eric. So yeah, Eric, I can remember when we were talking. I forgot when we first spoke. I think it was like last. I think it was like last summer, something like that. But I could tell, like when we were talking, it was. I keep using the phrase like proper hackers, low level guys. I could really get that impression. I think like we were on the call for a long time, going into a lot of detail about in terms of recruitment, the sort of people you might be after. So I got a really good sense of what things were all about, and I liked it. And it was good. And in terms of the types of guys on your team, I know you've got some very good hackers on the team. What do you think? What do you see? What are they doing that the listeners could learn from? What separates the exceptional elite hacker from the average one, if you like, from what you can see?
Absolutely. I think the concept, it's two things: self-sufficiency and just raw desire for self-progress, right? So if you can teach yourself, like, this industry is maturing, but we're still super, super early. If you can teach yourself and you can acquire the knowledge and find the ways to learn on your own, and then if you have a continual desire to learn, just those two things in itself, no matter what you're doing, you could be doing network pen testing or web app pen testing or social engineering, physical, like in any discipline, in any area of red teaming or security or pen testing, those two things combined are going to propel you to top 10% of your peer group. Now, I could break that down into more specific things. Okay, a person that goes and seeks CTFs or goes and finds open source software and creates advisories for those. And like, these are things, these are types of things that you can do under those umbrellas. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So basically, like a raw, like not just getting hyped when you listen to a podcast or a motivation, but like a
Yeah.
genuine burning desire, like raw persistence, like really energized. If you've got all that and you genuinely have got that over a sustained period of time, that's going to take you a long way. It's basically what you're saying.
The people that are top in this industry all share those two traits, in my personal opinion. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Another thing as well, it's almost like a slightly controversial topic to talk about, like really working hard, really going for it, really going above and beyond. But I agree, the best hackers I'm speaking to, they're not shutting the laptop at 5, 6 in the evening and then sat on the sofa all night watching TV. They're just obsessed. They can't stop. And you say that to some people, and it's, oh, be careful, burnout. But I think to a certain extent, you've got to put the hard yards in if you want to be up there, haven't you?
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for work-life balance and what is work and what is hobby. When your work and hobby are the same, are you just doing extra work for your employer? Are you training on the side and they're not paying for you to train? So these things are all real cons. Some employers are like, I'm not going to name names, but one of our competitors was notorious for not giving their pen testers any actual paid research time, like on your 9 to 5 time. They would tell you, do it all nights and weekends. That's when you're supposed to do your security research. And that's your own time, right? If your employer is telling you on your own time, go do work that will benefit us, that's not the best. But there is something to be said, especially when you're earlier in your career, that you on your own time as a hobby or just a general professional development might want to do more than your company provides you training for. So if a company says, I'll pay for one training class a year, that's wonderful. They're supporting you. They're giving you a training class a year, but that's one time a year that you're learning. You need to probably do something past that. When I was starting out, before I got my first professional job in security, I would do something that I called study Sundays. Every single Sunday, depending on how busy I was, but every single Sunday, 4 hours or 8 hours. And I studied and I read and I practiced. And I did that for a year before I applied for my first security job.
Okay, cool. Brilliant. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I think that if you want to be up there with the best, I think that kind of thing, from what I see as well, it's an absolute must. I think you might have already answered some of this, but I'll ask you anyway. What do you think holds people back? What do you think stops people from being the best?
Self-doubt, that's very huge. I see, I don't know if it's a societal thing or just I see much more imposter syndrome than I've ever seen before. It just continues to increase. I meet so many people that are in other areas of tech or they're academics finishing up their schooling, or just people that are working some other job function in security, but they want to do a different job function in security. The number one thing I see is just, I'm not sure I could do this. I don't think I can. It's just so much self-doubt. And yeah, it's a thing that's much more prevalent these days. And if you can get past that, then the whole world's open to you.
Yeah. This might be a really hard one to answer, but what do you think we could do, or anyone in the industry, or us as a community could do, or as individuals, what could we do to combat that? Any suggestions?
As an industry, I think last year, Google and Microsoft announced that they were going to spend $3 billion on security, investment in security over the next 5 years. It was a very self-fulfilling type of statement, though, because that is going to be mostly spent on their internal security. If any of those companies, like Google, Microsoft, any big company said, hey, we're going to go spend $10 million to create a learning platform for the entire industry, the entire world, for people to learn and encourage people, that would be huge. That could train tens of thousands of new security professionals, if not hundreds of thousands. Strategically, I would love to see the big companies support more open platforms. There's open security training, which is a great open platform. A lot of people contribute content to it, but so much more could be done. There's just one person, Zeno, that runs open security training as far as I know. And it could be, if with a budget and a team, he could create content for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people worldwide, and we could fill the gap that we're all talking about constantly in our security industry. Now, that's a strategic industry thing that I recommend happen. On an individual level, I think what needs to happen is every conference, every meetup, every conference just be open to people that are new and encouraging them. I've seen some conferences, I think it was the local OWASP meetup in Virginia. I believe they do this.
Okay.
Anyone that's new that joins, you have to speak for 5 minutes on anything. You can talk about how you desire to learn or something that you did learn or whatever, but you have to give a talk. You have to do something. And they just encourage everybody. And no matter what you spoke about, like, everyone's hyped for you. And I really like seeing things like that. We have a local meetup here in New York called NISEC. I try to be the outreacher when I see new people at NISEC and say, hey, what's your deal? Are you in security? Do you want to learn security? And yeah, so basically on an individual level, on a local meetup level, reach out to these people and make them feel welcomed and encourage them. And I have a standard email that I send people that has like my path to learning web app hacking. These are all the things I recommend you do. And when I meet people and they go, how do I do this? How do I become that? I shoot them that email. And some people have done it A to Z and have become really good. All right, I've spent too.
No, not at all, not at all. I think as well, some of these sayings might sound a bit cliche, but it's like not being scared of failure. That old saying, like, fail your way to success. I can just compare it to recruitment. Like, when you first start in recruitment, like, you're horrendous, you're terrible, and you learn from your mistakes. And it's almost like getting used to celebrating the failures and failing your way to success. I really like what you said as well about getting people to speak, because that's getting people used to feeling uncomfortable. When you feel uncomfortable, that's when you're growing and that's when you're pushing forward. And I can feel it when I do this podcast. Like, even today, Erik, coming on with you, I get nervous every time I'm doing these, but I know it's expanding me as a person. And it's perhaps we all get confused about nerves and feeling uncomfortable, and we associate them with negative feelings, but really they're probably quite positive in terms of progression. In terms of getting really good at web app security or web app pen testing, do you think it's really good to niche down and get really good at pen testing ADs or code review? Do you think that's good advice or bad advice?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've seen people be successful in both approaches. I've seen somebody that just dipped their toe in the water in every single area of security, and that has worked out for them. And I've seen other people that just deep dive into one thing and like just really, really deep, and that has worked out for them. So there is not one defined pattern for success. My personal approach and success in my career has been somewhere in the middle. Like, I've done deep dives on certain topics and certain times of my career. Other times I purposely took a step back and said, let me learn a little bit about everything here. Earlier in my career, I did learn a little bit about everything. I was like, okay, hey, what is VoIP? Let me read about it. Let me read the protocols. What are the security problems? Okay, I just spent 2 hours on VoIP, and that's all I'm doing. Now, there's some other people that would be like, hey, what's VoIP? What are all the security problems? Let me download all the VoIP software. Let me start hacking it. Let me start auditing all the VoIP stuff. Let me start building tools. And they've now spent 6 months deep diving on VoIP. And the ability to do that is maybe not going to be super applicable to the entire job market. Like, maybe there's only 5 VoIP security specialists that I know in the US at least, but Once you've done that, people know that you can do that for other topics. Okay, this person became like a VoIP security expert in 6 months and they're now worldwide renowned on it. Maybe they can also do that for IoT mosquito protocol or something. And now that's what we need them to do at our company or our team.
So showing that you've got that ability to deep dive, get obsessed about something, it shows that you've got the ability to pick new things up and learn stuff. It's probably, from your perspective, it's something to shout about on a resume. It would be attractive to you for a candidate perspective.
So I really wish I could say, yes, that's the way to go. But if I ask somebody, hey, what do you know about topic X? And they can go on for hours about it. But then when I ask them about topics Y or Z that are related and they have zero answers to me, I'm going to be a little disappointed. So like the ideal answer is you should know everything of everywhere to the highest degree, but that's obviously not practical, obviously not tenable. But don't be afraid to tell people like, hey, I've gone deep dive in these areas, but I just don't know these other areas. I can learn those things really quickly. I've had people on an interview tell me, oh, I don't know anything about that. Don't ask me that. And that kind of closes the door. It says to the potential employer, I don't even want to learn that. I don't even have the ability or the capability, or I just don't want to touch that. If you say, I've never done that much in that field or that area or that topic of tech stack, but I'd be really down to learn it. And if you give me a week, I'd be really versed on it. That shows the ability to learn and the desire to do other things.
Yeah, cool. I get it. Yeah, so it's cool to get obsessed with stuff, but just not at the detriment of blocking other things out altogether. Yeah, thanks, mate. Cool. I know, Erik, when it comes to programming languages, it's something that you certainly haven't shied away from. It's something you're really good at. I think it's an area where certain pen testers should improve. Sure you'd probably agree. I think there's lots and lots of benefits to being able to understand programming languages from a hacking perspective. If I am thinking about learning, say, 2 programming languages, which should I choose? Which 2 should I choose and why?
Gotcha. I might give a slightly hot take on this, but the number one language, if you will, for me, for all of security is command line shell scripting. If you are really, really good at shell scripting, you don't really need any other command line. Like you can do pretty much everything in sed and awk and bash and that world. And the commonality is no matter what Linux distribution you end up on, no matter what IoT system you're trying to own, they all have the same shell, right? So it's all some variation of a Unix shell, a BusyBox or Bash or Ash or something, but you can work with any of that. So that's a hot take because a lot of people are just going to say, oh, just use this high level programming language like Python and C or something like that. Those are probably the most common answers. You have to learn Python and C. And Python and C are great. But what I have used the most in my career to hack things is shell scripting.
And any advice for best ways to pick up new languages? Any hints, tips, any learning strategies you've got when you're learning a new language?
I really like coding challenge websites. So what was the one I used to use all the time? So I used to use one called Code Fights, but I forgot what it's called now. But basically, there's like Hacker Rank and Code Fights, and there's all of these like languages. Just they give you basic challenges, and you can try to do learning the language through practical application. So I have this small challenge. I can solve this in 10 lines of code. Now that's once you learn the syntax. Like just learning the syntax, you just read the docs and you get the syntax. And now trying to apply it to solve problems. I really like those code challenge websites.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so anything like that, Erik, if you've got, I know you've just mentioned that one there, but any others that come to mind, we can put them in the show notes after. So thanks for that. But essentially what you're saying is learn the syntax and then break it down into bite-sized manageable chunks, set yourself mini targets and stuff like that, milestones.
Exactly. Just practical, small things like, hey, and your first challenges are going to be 5 lines of code, 10 lines of code. That's all you need. And then you'll level up from there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I was watching a previous interview with you from quite a while ago. You'll probably remember better than me, but it was talking about you discovering local file inclusion as an exploit before it was even a thing in the early days. And that kind of shows me that you've got like a different kind of mindset. There's probably more you can tell us around that as well. I've skimmed over that really quickly, but just basically the question is, to obviously find exploits before anyone else does, and then everyone else to jump on the bandwagon after. That shows a different way of thinking. Is it either you've either got that hacker mindset or you haven't, or is there stuff we can do to our minds for the listeners listening that we can condition our minds in a different way, get ourselves thinking in a better way as a pen tester, hacker?
Finding new vulnerability classes is about taking seemingly disconnected topics and putting them together in a way that yields some sort of security consequence. So I'll just walk you through what I was thinking. So I was reading the code of this application, and it had an include statement. And at that point in time, I had done remote, and this is PHP code. I had done remote includes to get remote command execution. So I knew, hey, I could do this. But then I said, how does include work? Are there other things that I could do besides a website? Could I connect to PHP, FTP, or SMB connection? So my first thought was actually just connecting remote to other things. And then I started reading the actual code in C of how include worked. And I saw that it supported different protocols, but it also supported like // and local stuff. So it would local check things. So then you think to yourself, okay, I've just learned information from the documents that I've read and from reading the source code. And now I'm going to think to my ultimate end goal is I want to run code. I want this function to run code. Where can that code exist? And then I knew Linux file system knowledge. I knew that standard installs had standard logs. And then I knew what could go in those logs, what data could go in those logs. And even if I didn't know these things, I could go and research them. So it's a mix between just knowing a lot of random facts and then sometimes seeking the situations that allow you to put the random facts together with a certain condition, and all of this information gets together into an exploitable situation. So that's finding a new vulnerability classes, random facts and knowledge with like purposely trying to correlate those things into an end state.
Yeah.
And that's how it worked for me.
So there's so much stuff you've said there, like jumping across multiple languages, jumping across multiple systems. No, it's great, but it gives us an insight, because I'm breaking this down going, you're obviously saying stuff, and a lot of that you probably just take for granted now. But yeah, like I said, there's multiple languages there, multiples. Yeah.
You're totally correct. There's multiple dimensions here, because I would have never known how to do this if I didn't study the Apache web server. If I didn't say, okay, I want to learn the Apache web server and I want to learn how this thing operates, I would not have known to do this PHP thing in this way. And if I didn't have previous experience with Linux package installation, then I wouldn't have known where the logs were. And if I didn't have knowledge about file systems and like %00, then I wouldn't have been able to truncate something and make it work on an inode. So it's just a bunch of random things that kind of all coalesce together. And then now you can exploit local file inclusion.
No, there is. Yeah, thank you, mate. No, it's really good. And also, if you hadn't done that, going back to not just what you used to do on a Sunday for 4 to 8 hours, but if you hadn't done that extra work, which is compounded over weeks, months, years, decades, if you hadn't done all that, then you probably would have never got there in the first place. It's all these things that make a difference, mate. Yep.
The other thing is also studying patterns. So you study patterns that are released by other people. So watching the Black Hat talks about new vulnerability classes, reading advisories, how did other people do this? So those patterns become patterned onto your mind after you absorb them. Oh, okay, this person figured out that A, B, C, and D are all correlated, and now they have a new vulnerability. So now you can abstract those patterns and apply them to other systems in other ways.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, mate. This is good. This is great. And I think as well, you are taking a really holistic view on things as well. You're not just looking at something there, close up for anyone just listening. You're stepping back, and I think you're really taking a holistic approach, and obviously applying a lot of knowledge that you've learned across a certain period of time. But mate, thank you. That's good to get an insight into your mind. So cool. Yeah, I know we just touched upon learning resources a moment ago, but which learning resources have you found have had the most positive effect on your career and ability as a hacker?
Sure. So I went to school for computer science eventually. I started out as a polymer engineer, but some fundamental computer science courses were very, very pivotal to my knowledge. Fundamentals of operating systems, computer organization and architecture, and a general software engineering course. Those 4 courses and just data structures, these fundamental computer science courses were very important for me as a software professional, software security professional. But that was academic sense. And like, I went to seek this knowledge and I had that opportunity to do it. As far as like self-directed knowledge, I was lucky enough to be able to figure out that you could volunteer for certain conferences, and they would let you, if you put in like 12 hours on day one, on day two, they would let you like sit in and on whatever training that you wanted. When I was young and coming up, I was able to do that at a couple conferences, and I took a computer forensics training course from Brian Carrier, and like those things were really good because I would have never been able to afford those otherwise when I was just first starting to get in, and I just really wanted that knowledge. So that was another thing that worked out really well for me. And then certain books, there's a lot of really bad books on security, and I wish somebody had like a Yelp for security books, something where I could just be like, this is worth it. This one is not worth your time. Don't touch it at all. Because the Amazon reviews, you can't really, they're all fluff and they're not high fidelity information. But yeah, so 60% of security books suck. Okay. 39% are okay, and 1% are amazing. Best security book I've ever read is by a professor in the UK named Ross Anderson. He wrote the book called Security Engineering. It is like this thick. It changed the way I thought about a lot of things in security after reading Security Engineering, because he talked about it from so many different angles. He talked about it from the academic mathematic theory angle. He talked about it from the policy angle, from like nation states and energy policy and all sorts of weird angles with that. He talked about it from like the low level technical angles. So he just covered all these different angles and talked about security problems in a holistic way that I had never come across before in any of my trainings or conversations with colleagues or other security researchers. So I really like the Security Engineering book.
Okay, cool. Any more within that 39%?
The ones that are okay, I don't know. They would be more like topic-based things. Like Antonio wrote a book on OAuth 2. Like that's a very topic-based thing. OAuth 2, it's not just web hacking, but it's like even a more sub-focus of web hacking. Like there's an entire book on OAuth 2 hacking. But once you've got all the basics of OAuth 2 hacking down, now you can do like other types of federated protocol hacks, and you can think outside the box for, okay, what does Open Connect hacking look like? Or what sorts of IDPs can I hack that aren't OAuth 2 or maybe that are proprietary to some organization?
Cool. Thanks, mate. Thanks, Erik. And yeah, just as a reminder, everyone, we'll put any books that Erik mentions or links or courses, I'll make sure they all go in the show notes after. No one will miss anything. So, Erik, next question. I know you've been a CISO in the past. You've ran security teams. You're now running your own business. I know you've probably answered some of this before, but what do you think the biggest differences are between an average hacker and an exceptional one? What do you see the biggest differences?
I think I might be like going back to my old answer of just that drive and self-determination. Okay. I think that's it.
And I think if that's the case, I think it shows the importance of it. I think as well, it goes back to just actually genuinely meaning that. Loads of people can just say that when they feel like it, but it's probably been like that when you don't feel like it.
But I also don't want to make it all about the individual, because a lot of these things are circumstantial to a person's situation in life, right? If you have a ton of drive and you're very motivated, but you have 4 kids and you're trying to like work as many jobs as you can to really raise a family well, that's a really hard thing. You have the drive and you have the motivation. You just have too many responsibilities on your plate. And there's a lot of life circumstances for people that they can't really do anything about. So I don't want to just put it all on the individual. And in thinking internationally, like language barrier might be a thing, right? The grand majority of the security industry is English. There's not, in what earlier in this conversation, I said, we're an immature industry. So we're immature in the English speaking side of security. Forget like the non-English speaking side of security, because you have a lot of people that need to translate all those things and a lot of people don't, especially the advisories and the mailing lists and the Twitter and the blog posts and all of that. And yeah, we've got like Google Translate and that helps a lot, but some things are lost in context. I remember I used to join a lot of underground hacker groups in different countries. And before Google, there was Babelfish, and I would copy and paste from IRC the messages, drop it into Babelfish to try and figure out what like these Russian hackers or like Chinese hackers, or I was in all sorts of weird hacker groups back in the day.
So yeah, I know you've worked on both offensive and defensive side. We've touched upon a holistic approach a couple of times in the conversation already. So The question is, has working on the blue team helped your ability as a hacker? And if the answer is yes, and I want to increase my blue team knowledge with a view of enhancing my red team skills, where should I start? I don't know if I've said that question clearly enough or not. I hope I have.
Yeah, hold the second question. I'm going to forget it. I'll ask it
Okay.
for you in a second. For the first part, yes, absolutely. Working in a blue team for 3 years helped me on red team stuff and it helped me in two ways. One, I learned in person the difficulties of implementing recommendations. So it's easy as a pen tester, as a consultant, to just come in and say, oh, you should fix this, you should do that. But you don't see you come in, you do the report, you're like, do these things, I'm out. And you don't see the long tail of actually what happens when you do these and what are some of the consequences when you do them wrong. I realized that some of my recommendations as a red teamer were actually bad because of people or process things. And until you're there and you're like, oh, wait, like this thing happens. Oh, you should have automated patching for all of your software. Okay. Guess what happens when you have automated patching all your software? You deploy a bad patch, everything breaks. And all of prod is not working. That's your fault, security team. You told them to do that. Is there something better than we can do here? The answer is usually yes. So that's just one example. And the other thing is just how businesses operate, right? So it's super easy to just say, do this, do that. But like understanding that businesses have risk tolerance and that you should never say no and you should never say yes. In my opinion, a security expert should always say maybe, because we have to weigh the risks and maybe we have compensating controls that can allow us to do this and avoid extra work or stay within budget or stay within our risk tolerances. I learned in the blue team, when I started, I said no to everything. Oh, can we put a vulnerable WordPress instance up and run a marketing site on it? No, absolutely not. By the end of my 3 years, I was like, yes, you can. Yes, you absolutely can. Yeah. With a maybe. And we can do it if we think about it in these ways and we mitigate these risks in these ways and we have backups and we have like monitoring for integrity. And sure, yes, I will allow you to put a vulnerable WordPress instance up for business reasons, as long as we have a way to do things in a risk-averse manner that is within our tolerances.
Yeah, no, thanks. And by the way, that's massive because I speak to so many guys that have got the frustration of not getting stuff fixed, but maybe because they haven't seen stuff on both sides, maybe that's why. So you've probably saved yourself a lot of stress and annoyance by realizing, by having the ability to see things from both sides effectively. So, yeah. Thank you. I don't know, from memory, I can't remember if certs are necessarily a deal breaker for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they were. But which 2 or 3 certs do you feel give the most value and why?
Yeah, certs are a huge topic, and it's very interesting because I see it regionally. There's one country in the world that values certs more than any other country that I've seen. Do you know that country, Thomas?
America?
Nope, the UK.
The UK. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, certainly with Crest, probably I would say. Yeah.
There's only one country in the world where when I talk to companies there, they just go, give me full details of every certification everyone has and what your company certifications are. And I need all the information about certifications. I'm like, but do you want to know if we're good at hacking or do you want to know our certifications? They're like, we want the certifications. Tell us all the certifications. That's what I get from UK companies. I don't get that as much from US companies.
That's interesting.
So on an individual basis, I've been pretty bearish about certifications in my time in the industry. I have gotten certifications. I have a Network Plus. I got that before I even joined the industry. It was part of my study Sundays. I wanted to learn about networks, and so as part of that, I did a Network Plus. And then I was working at EY, and they forced me to get a CISP. That was not by choice, but I have a CISP. Individual certifications these days for red teaming, pen testing. Offensive security obviously has their programs pretty mature, and they have one of the most recognized ones. There's tons of them out there. I'm always hearing about new ones. I just heard of ONT or OINT or something. INT, I think it was. I just heard of INT. There's the CEH. So there's tons of certifications out there. The Cyber Mentor now has one that a lot of people are getting. I haven't examined all of these certifications in depth. The only one that I've really taken a good look at is the offensive security one. I can tell you correlation-wise that I have seen people with those other certifications that I mentioned not be very good. So I don't know what that means, but yeah, certifications are always a hot topic because it's so hard to get one right. Like I actually like the way the CISP is done, because the CISP has the common body of knowledge. They just have this 10,000 raw facts that they just want everybody to know these raw facts. And the CISP is just, here's 100 questions about these 10,000 raw facts that we want you to know. So it's just a small sample of the whole thing. And that way you're saying, okay, this person has a good enough grasp of this huge common body of knowledge that they're good, right? The equivalent of that for web apps or net pen testing or something, no one's really done that. They more like OSCP and things like that are more focused on the techniques and the tools, as opposed to raw facts. No, all right, I'm rambling. Let me just make this statement and we'll conclude it. I don't think anybody does certifications right, but probably, and I don't think anybody will on an individual basis. If you can do a lot of certifications, it does show that you have determination. It doesn't necessarily show that you're the best hacker. And for an organizational level, I think most certifications on an organizational level are just pay to play BS, like Crest and all of these things. They're total BS. It's just give them $25,000 or $50,000 and you're accepted. And then I know some Crest person is going to write me and be like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Like it is. And it's just to the benefit to a small amount of people, to the organizations that push it, right? I'm not going to name names, but there's a certain mega large global security consulting company that really pushes everyone to Crest because they have Crest and they're on the board of Crest. And so it works for them to just make it like an old boys club. But that's very anti-inclusion, right? It doesn't allow for diversity. It's very anti-capitalistic. It's anti-diversity and inclusion. It's just anti so many things. But it works for them because it gets them clients, and it gets their clients locked into thinking that only Crest people can be good pen testers. But I could go on for an hour just on that.
No, thanks, Erik. We could do a whole episode on certs. Yeah. And I think really for pen testers progressing, it's like they have got a use, but it's probably not what you first thought it was for. They've probably got a use of maybe getting you an interview at certain companies or getting you past certain barriers or this, that, and the other, or screening before you meet the head of pen testing or something like that, but probably not the original.
The industry overall, and especially this comes from government, federal, military space, they have an innate desire for certifications. That's just how those industries work. And so since security is so heavily it came from government, military, federal world, they just said, okay, we're just going to go with this. So there's tons and tons of jobs out there that says must have a CISP, must have a CEH. They just pick a random certification. I really dislike that. I think it's just somebody in the HR team, like, well, we need to have some criteria for selection. What can that be? And there's nothing better. So I understand how it happens. I don't like it, but I understand how it happens.
Yeah, no, cool. We'll stop because I could carry on about this as well. Yeah. So we'll move on. I've asked you on 2 or 3 different times what makes up a great and an average hacker and a great hacker. So I'm not going to ask you that again. But one thing I would like to try and get from you is a realistic expectation on timelines. Like we spoke about imposter syndrome and stuff like that. And I think some of it comes from this instantaneous culture that social media puts out and this, that, and the other. Could you give us some realistic timelines, say from going to starting out to being like, I don't know, a mid-level, or just pick maybe a mid-level to an exceptional senior? What do you think?
So like a mid-level, meaning like you have 2 years experience, you're already doing something?
Yeah, let's say 2 years experience, working in a production environment, commercial, want to get up to really strong senior.
So it's a very interesting thing because there's 2 dimensions to it. One is on-site or remote. And when I was learning, I learned so much more when I was on site with a team in an office. I probably learned 3 times the rate that when I had jobs where I worked remote. Okay. Now, the reality of today is that most jobs are now remote and in-office opportunities are few and far between. So that's just an unfortunate reality of the current state of things. But I know, at least for me personally, I learn way more and faster when I'm on site with a team. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I have seen people that just keep the lights on for 10 years and just like they do the bare minimum and they just do enough to keep the lights on. Now, does that person deserve to be a super senior? By the numbers, they should. They've been doing this 10 years. But I've seen other people that go past those people in under 2 years. So It's a bit to the individual level. So in my personal opinion, it's not a prescriptive, like it's exactly this amount of years and then you should be super senior. It's about your opportunity that your job has given you, plus what training opportunities you seek on your own, plus what training opportunities you seek through your company, and your personal performance. Are you always striving to be the best, or are you just, yeah, I just want a job where I work 9 to 5 and that's all I want? Some people can get from mid-level to super senior in 2 years. I think that's a very realistic thing. Some people will just literally never get there.
Okay. So if you're really pushing and you really wanted to do it, 2 years is probably the quickest.
Depends, yeah, but that sounds appropriate to me. To go from like a security consultant to a senior security consultant, yeah, I think 2 years is about that. But again, it depends on a lot of things. Now, let's not even talk about title inflation, which is a whole other problem. Like some of our competitors hire people out of school and they're like, they interned with us, so now they're starting as a senior out of uni. So I'm just like, that's not appropriate. Like this person's starting as a senior at 22 years old just because they interned with you. So one of our competitors did that, and it's just like, no, that's not okay. Or another competitor of ours had somebody go from straight out of uni to being a regional director in 6 years. And I was like, a regional director, you have teams of managers that have managers and they're all reporting to you. And I don't think you have that much global experience. And I met this person and it turned out to be true. The person just didn't have that much experience, but sometimes attrition mandates title inflation. Oh crap, a bunch of people just quit. We don't have anybody else. You just make this person from a senior to a manager and now a manager to a regional director in 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you why people do it, and that's it. Might be a bit controversial, but I'll say it anyway. But it's basically to retain staff more. Is it to please end clients?
It's a mix of things. It might be the two things you just mentioned. It might just be like, hey, we have nobody else, and hiring this person is going to take 3 months. So we just need someone to get this done now. Sometimes it's retaining an individual. They're like, I need to have a higher title or else I'm out. And sometimes that person is really deserving of it when they bring that to the table. And other times they just feel that they should be a manager when they really shouldn't. It's a mix of everything.
Cool. Thanks, Erik. We've definitely answered that question. Yes, you've got a CTF background. I'd like you to tell us more about it. We've briefly touched upon it at the top of this show, but I think there's way more you can tell us about your CTF background. And I'd like to hear from you what you think the best CTFs to be doing these days in terms of self-development gains are as well.
Sure. Yeah, I started doing CTFs and self-driven war games back in 2001, I think. And there were only 2 CTFs in the world at that point. There was like one that was secretly run by the US government, and they didn't tell anyone it was run by the US government. It was them trying to find hacking talent. And the other one was DEF CON. So yeah, I started doing CTFs back then. And CTFs have gotten to the point where the best CTFs in the world are just like, so intense. Like you have to be working with a team all year round, practicing, constantly doing CTFs to just qualify for DEF CON. It's gotten so intense as an academic competition these days that it's crazy. But at the same time that the highest level CTFs have gotten even harder, there have been more CTFs. Now, if you go to CTF Time, I think it's ctftime.org is where you find all of the CTFs, calendar of CTFs. You'll find that there's hundreds of them. And many of them are beginner oriented. And I really like that. And a lot of them are just like, hey, there's no real prizes for this, but we just want you to have a competitive environment where learning is encouraged and you can interact with peers, maybe in a chat room. In fact, I just did one like that this past weekend. On Saturday was a B-Sides NYC, and Include Security wrote some CTF challenges for the CTF at that conference. And it was a little more beginner oriented. There were definitely some challenges there that beginners could get. But then we also had some harder ones, and ours was one of the harder ones. So yeah, I like to see lots of CTFs. And the hard thing though about CTFs is if you've never done them before, it's the chicken and egg scenario. I want to hack, and here's a thing that says hack me, but I don't know where to start. So you have to start with that background knowledge and start learning and reading a bit on your own before you just dive right into a CTF. They definitely have if I will tell you this fact, people who do CTFs, 99% of the time they work out really well for our company. So it's a big green flag in hiring. If I see people that do a lot of CTFs, I'm like, this person would probably fit in well here.
Okay, cool. So if you do CTF, shout about it on your resume.
Absolutely.
So you were basically saying it does make a massive difference. Obviously, the biggest thing is that the fact that people know something's there, so that's a different mindset altogether.
That is true. Although I have done some CTFs where the challenge author screwed up and there was actually nothing there.
Okay, very different. Maybe that's a new niche. Maybe that's
no. That was an accident. That was an accident. That was just a bad challenge written. But yeah, it is. You're correct. Like it is a very different mindset when is something here versus I know something's here. I have to find it. It's needle in a haystack versus is there a needle in this field? I don't even know. Did someone drop a needle in this field versus I know someone put a needle in this haystack? It's a different mindset of motivation, but the same underlying currents of methodology should still happen in any case. Break down a problem, break down an architecture, compartmentalize what are the problems, or what are the potential problems, and how you could solve each potential problem to take over something. Like these types of mindsets are the same on a general security assessment where you're unsure if anything's there, and a CTF challenge. It's analyze holistically, break down, compartmentalize, solve each challenge, get the solution, get your exploit.
Brilliant. Really good. Thanks, Erik. Cool. So in terms of Include Security, your business, I know there's probably certain things that you can and can't tell us, but anything in terms of the type of work you've got going on, types of engagements that the listeners might find interesting, any pen testers that are thinking about applying to Include Security, what can they expect? And yeah, anything exciting you can tell us in general?
Sure. And there's not a lot of secrets about it. We do security assessments, and that's the most common thing we do. We work with a lot of big tech companies and also small startups as well. And it's a nice mix because you might do like 1 million lines of Java one day, and then you might just do 5,000 lines of Python right after that. And the 5,000 lines of Python might be a really cool like artificial intelligence learning model. And the 1 million lines of Java might be like a consumer platform for whatever. And yeah, I like that we have that variety in that mix. Our typical assessment is a source assisted application assessment. It's a client, it's a server, it's a web app, it's a mobile app, it's an IoT device. The client usually gives us the source code, and we have a dynamic running instance of the application. So we can hack into it with burp, black box style, like that way. But we also have the source code, so we can run dynamic scanners, we can run static scanner, and we can use manual hacking and manual code review. We can use all of the best approaches to gaining assurance for that platform. And even sometimes we might create custom solutions. Like one of our clients right now has an automotive embedded operating system that's written in C++. And they really liked that we had fuzzing skills. So they asked us to write a bunch of custom fuzzer harnesses for their operating system to fuzz all these different parts of it. So that's what we're doing now. It's a big project. We've got 3 or 4 people working on it, and we get to write a bunch of really cool fuzzers that really find bugs. So we put the fuzzers into the fuzzing harnesses, and they are finding crashes and finding exploits.
Very good. Cool. And did I remember rightly, you get all your end clients have come from referrals, if I remembered that rightly?
Primarily, yeah. I would say 99% of our clients heard of us through another client. Yeah. Or person A is a client of ours and has been working with us for 2 years, and then they go to another company, and now person A at second company is, hey, I worked with Include Security at the other company, and I think we should use them here. There's a lot of that as well, because people move jobs a lot. So it's talking to your colleagues and your peers, and then job hopping. Like it just distributes the amount of people that hear the good news about what we do.
Cool. Very good. And in terms of pen testers you'd like to hear from, we've probably covered some of this already, but what type of hacker, pen tester, offensive security engineer would you like to hear from?
Sure. People that want to spend the next up to 5 years, like doing all sorts of assessments of software systems that are okay if it's web or okay if it's something more low level. We do have a couple people that are very oriented just to one, like I only want to ever do web, or I only ever want to do a low level like IoT system. We do have a couple people, and we do have enough work to keep them in their niche, but we do look for people that are a little more generalist. Hey, I like hacking on web. I can also do some crypto systems, or I like hacking on C and C++, but I have no problem hacking Python and Ruby. That's all good to me. So the more diverse your skill sets, I think the happier you'll be at IncludeSec, and the better Yeah, that's it. The more diverse your skill sets and interests, the happier you'll be at IncludeSec.
Of course, you're definitely not going to get pigeonholed off into one thing, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Unless you want to.
unless you want to, exactly. And we really try and look out for folks because a lot of clients do staff augmentations that are never ending, right? Some of our big competitors, they'll do 6 or 12-month staff augs, and you'll do that. And then at the end of that, if you do a good job, the client says, we want you to do it again. So you just did 12 months on client A, and now you're going to be doing another 12 months on client A. So at that point, why are you even working at a consulting company if all you're doing is working at client A? Go work at client A. So we try and do rotations of staff augmentations. So we give you 4 months. And if you choose, hey, I had to do another round, then you could do another 4 months. And if not, then we'll put you on other things just to make sure that you keep that diversity, but also we cater to your preferences. So we try and make the best of both worlds. We have the staff augs, but they're not too much and they're not overwhelming for people.
Cool. Keeps levels of stimulation nice and high.
Yeah. And that's the minority of what we do. That's like maybe 15%, 20% of what we do. It's not everything. Some other companies are just like, all we do is this.
Okay, cool. Erik, I think a really good way to learn and develop is to reverse engineer attack paths, real life attacks that have happened in the wild. Any attacks you've seen recently or heard about, or in any capacity that you think could be helpful for the listeners to potentially look at?
I agree 100% with what you said. The hardest thing to do, and when it's a particular specific vulnerability against one software system or one individual system, then it's easy to analyze the advisory and look at everything yourself. But when it's more of an entire end-to-end breach scenario, it's less likely to have public information. It usually doesn't benefit a company to be like, here's all the details about how we were hacked. Let's just tell you everything. Here's why our endpoint solution didn't work. It's because Jane over there, the security engineer that was in charge of endpoint security, didn't load her console up and didn't check the alerts. That's Jane's fault. And so anyways, it's rare to see those things. So when they do happen, I try and dig into them as much as possible. Verizon puts out the data breach report, and sometimes they get insight because their clients have these major breaches and they have that insight, and all what they can do is aggregate the lessons learned and not necessarily give us the specific lessons. But CrowdStrike, Mandiant, Verizon, all these people, when they put out how this happened, how this campaign happened, or how this breach happened, I like to suck those in as from the red team NetPen perspective, that they're so knowledgeable. It's so good to know that. And yeah, from just the business perspective, from the blue team perspective, it's also good to know that, to know if your proactive controls are the right controls, right? If you're finding out that everyone's getting popped because of SIM cloning, then you're going to stop doing 2FA through SMS, right? And if you don't read those reports that say SIM cloning is prevalent and all the breaches that are happening because of SIM cloning, you would never know. Let's stop doing that. Yeah. I guess that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and not only that, Erik, it's interesting as well. Like reading about this kind of stuff is real life situations. It's highly interesting and obviously great for self-development. But look, as we come to the end here, by the way, everyone, I gave Erik a bit of a plan and I alluded to how many questions I wanted to ask you, Erik. And originally I scheduled it for half an hour and I realised I made a mistake. But I'm glad that I got you for a full hour, Erik, because there's loads that you've given us. There's loads of insight. I love that bit in the middle about your mindset and jumping across different systems and languages. I think that gives people a really good insight into what they need to do, what's expected, and how to get really good. Is there anything, my friend, that I should have asked you that I haven't, or anything we haven't covered? Or
no, I think this is a great conversation. I hope just whoever listens to this just finds the right path to learning, development, switching industries, or just leveling up your skill set. I hope something said here was useful in your self-development.
Definitely. Erik, thanks for your time, and I'll see you soon.